At the end of 2024, I made a resolution to myself that I would make an effort to watch more movies. I love movies a lot, and while I've always tried to watch new ones, I ended 2024 watching maybe 10 new movies. And whenever I finally did decide to put something on, I would just end up watching Big Daddy for the 40th time and playing Picross in the background. So in 2025, I decided to do something different. I decided to make a real effort to watch new movies. And I ended last year watching more movies and stepping further outside of my comfort zone than I ever had before. And while 2025 as a whole has been a shitty, terrible year for the world in so many different ways, this was something that made my year fulfilling, and I really want to talk about my favorite movies I watched in 2025. Now before we start talking about the movies, I want to mention that I have a rating system inspired by the GOAT, Super Eyebetch Wolf. It's out of 5 stars, but actually 7, but still kind of 5. And I know that sounds really stupid, and that's because it is, but to me, a 5-star movie is a movie that does exactly what it's trying to do really well and effectively, and in that sense is perfect. And when I give something a 5, it is a quote-unquote perfect movie. But because I don't have a super strict criteria for what a 5 is, I like to have extra stars for pieces of media that are just simply beyond. A 6 is a movie that transcends its own medium and is something that has stayed with me for a very long time. And a 7 is something so profound and special that it changed an aspect of my life. And yes, I know the rating system isn't technically out of 5 stars if it goes up to 7. I don't care. Shut up. This is my YouTube video, and I can do whatever I want. Fuck you, Joey. I do want to mention a few movies before we start that were really great but didn't make my top 10. I really liked Mickey 17. It's a fun sci-fi movie where Robert Pattinson has to go out and do dangerous tasks for a ship heading to Niflheim. Every time our protagonist Mickey dies, he's cloned into a new version of himself, but whether or not this new version is really him is up for discussion. The movie is really sweet and endearing, focusing on Mickey's relationship with his partner Nasha and their journey to help the Creepers, a species already living on Niflheim. But by far the best part of this movie is the completely unhinged performances by Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. So fucking funny the whole time, and somehow less cartoonishly evil than world leaders in real life. 4 stars.
There's a new Marvel out that's supposed to be nuts.
Friendship is not a movie you should watch if seeing people crumble in the most uncomfortable of situations is too much for you. This movie is hilarious, but also so hard to watch. Without spoiling it too much, a man has a couple nice hangouts with his new neighbor and then proceeds to ruin his life because he can't understand social cues. Easily the funniest movie I watched last year and something I recommend with a slight bit of caution. 4 stars.
And it's getting closer.
Lake Mungo is a mockumentary about a family trying to deal with the grief of their daughter Alice's unexpected and tragic death. The movie told from different perspectives of the family members recounting the events before and after her death, until the family becomes convinced that Alice's ghost is haunting their home. What comes next is one of the most interesting movies I've ever seen, as the camera plays around with information, making the viewer think one thing and then completely disproving it in the next scene. Finishing with one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen, something that made me re-examine every dark corner in my house for the next 3 weeks. This one seems pretty divisive, so I can't guarantee you'll like it, but I can promise that it'll be something you've never seen before. 4 stars. Videodrome is something everyone needs to watch. I think if I watched this movie in high school, it would have completely destroyed me. It's impossible to watch this and not see its DNA everywhere. Some of the most imaginative practical effects I've ever seen. I cannot believe it took me this long to watch this movie. I think if I watched this a bit earlier in the year, it would be in my top 10, but I watched so many amazing movies this year that I sadly have to put Videodrome as my unofficial number 11. 4 stars. Nope is a movie about family, connection, and purpose. When Otis Sr. unexpectedly dies, his children are now forced to decide what they want to do with their lives. OJ wanting to continue the family business even though they're barely scraping by, and M wanting to get out and find something more fulfilling. OJ needing his sister's help, and that becoming more and more of a chore for her begins to fracture the sibling relationship. And then, boom, We're hit with this mysterious entity in the sky that scares the shit out of him and OJ, but soon becomes their last hope to save their family's ranch. What is this creature? What really happened to their dad? Why is this cloud not moving? And what does the mysterious theme park owner Jupe have to do with everything? 5 stars. Kinds of Kindness was a fucking trip. Sandwiched between Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things and his newest movie Begonia, I've heard people talk about this movie like it's a disappointment. And I seriously couldn't disagree more. An anthology about one man's obsession with his boss, a woman coming home after being lost at sea, and a cult trying to find their chosen one, I found every single one of these stories to be incredibly interesting and fun. Every story tied together by the kinds of kindness people show each other and the toxicity and harm that these fake kindnesses can have on people. The coolest thing about this movie is how the cast changes into completely different people every story. Everyone is amazing in this movie, but by far my favorite was Jesse Plemons. Jesse's character in the second and third movie could have been 2 completely different actors. I mean, it's unbelievable how different they feel. And I think that comes down to the writing. Even though some of these characters are only on screen for a small amount of time, they feel so realized and developed. Definitely one of my top movies that came out last year, and something I really wish got more praise. 5 stars. Some of you might have heard of Sympathy from Mr. Vengeance as Park Chan-wook's prequel to Oldboy. While not a prequel in story and plot, the same themes and ideas can be seen between the 2 movies as well as the third iteration, Lady Vengeance. And while trying to compare Sympathy to Oldboy is like comparing Invisigal and Blonde Blazer to Malevola, I think Sympathy completely stands alone as one of the most compelling and beautiful movies I've ever seen. Sympathy is so striking with its cinematography, and if you're a person who likes to look at pretty camera shots, this movie will fuck you in the ass and get up next morning and make you pancakes. The dual narrative of rich CEO Dong and lowly deaf Ryu enacting their vengeances on each other, ruining themselves as their paths eventually cross, is so fucking good. With one of the coldest lines I've ever heard in a movie, the last encounter makes this whole movie worth watching. It is seriously one of the best moments of all movies of all time. 5 stars. David Lynch passed away last year, and as a person who has left such an impact on film and art, it was a devastating loss. Lynch's movies and TV have some of the most iconic styles and signatures. When you see one of his works, you know it's his, and that's because he cared so much about making what was authentic and meaningful to him. And going back and watching Eraserhead for the first time, you can see the DNA for everything, the uncanny look and dialogue, the surreal and subconscious imagery. It's everything David Lynch. If Mulholland Drive was a dreamy escape, then Eraserhead is a feverish nightmare. Everything about this world is painful, sharp, and rough. The eyes of every person dig into Henry, livid that he even exists. The buildings are dilapidated and uninviting. Nothing about this world is kind or helpful. Everything is anxious and irritated and hates you. And if you look into what David Lynch was going through when he made this movie, you can really see a person scared and struggling, and that's what this movie is. If art is just entertainment for you, then I don't think you'll like Eraserhead. But if you're interested in seeing the real thoughts and struggles of a person reflected into their art, then I highly recommend you watch Eraserhead. 5 stars. I watched My Dinner with Andre in an SUV on a loud and uncomfortable road trip and still found myself entranced the entire time. My Dinner with Andre is a beautiful and important film, but if you don't know what you're getting into, it can be really jarring. If you are a person that likes acting and performance and writing and theater, then I promise you will be able to appreciate this movie. Just please understand that this movie is exactly what the title says, a person having dinner with Andre. And if this sounds boring to you, then fair, that's okay. I really, really love this movie, and without spoiling, the way the conversation breaks down and the pieces start to come together and show who these two people are, What are their insecurities, their fears, their beliefs, their everythings? It's fucking amazing. And I know I had many nights like this, whether I was sleeping over at a friend's house or just talking over a voice call. The nights like these that felt like they would go on forever are some of my favorite memories I have. 6 stars. What happens when you are trapped with someone you do not know? Maybe you're taking an Uber, maybe you're riding up an elevator, but in those moments where it's just you and someone else, what is stopping them from trying to harm you? Maybe you assume it's implied consequences they might face. Maybe you're optimistic that the average person is moral, but no matter what, you can never be sure. In the Lighthouse, we follow Winslow, an overworked and slightly depressed Wiki arriving to a tiny remote island. Accompanying him is veteran Thomas Wake, a mean, scrutinizing man who berates Winslow at every chance. But it's not until Winslow asks to work at the top of the lighthouse does Wake truly become unhinged. The tensions rise, and as the conditions get worse and worse, the two men find themselves stuck on the island for an indefinite amount of time. And then what happens after that is for you to find out. The Lighthouse is fucking amazing. This movie is so stunning, and with lesser actors, this two-man show just would not work. But obviously, with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, they knock it out of the park. 6 stars. Every time I think about Audition, I like it more and more. This is one of the most beautifully shot movies I've ever seen. Every time the camera cuts, we are blessed with a frame that should be kept in the Louvre. And this is maybe the scariest movie I watched all last year. There are scenes in this movie that made me genuinely cover behind my hands like a little kid. The most interesting part of this movie is just how well it's aged. Audition follows the story of Shigeharu Aoyama, a middle-aged TV executive whose wife passed away and has been taking care of their son alone ever since. And right away we see hints of Aoyama's immoral behavior, with him being stopped in the elevator by his secretary. Her obviously implying some sort of relationship they had, and him blowing her off. This movie is a criticism of the unchecked power dynamics people like Aoyama use to get what they want from the women in their lives. And while Aoyama is definitely the victim in this movie, he is not someone without criticism. Because of his son's insistence that he get remarried, Aoyama and his friend set up a fake TV audition to find the perfect woman for him. And after some unethical power dynamics used in the audition, Aoyama meets Asami. And honestly, that's all I want to say. This was my most unexpected movie I watched last year, and something that I will continue to talk about for years to come. 6 stars. If you look at my YouTube profile for a second, you can probably tell I have some amount of affinity for Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man came to me at a really confusing time in my life. I was a senior in high school, and a lot of big things had just happened in my personal life, and I was feeling depressed and unmotivated. But then, on a whim, I watched the first episode of Chainsaw Man, and then 2 weeks later, I had read every chapter of the manga. I have so many things to say about the series, and it genuinely has changed my life and changed the way I see the world and people. I mention all of this to say I am insanely biased. I was gonna love this movie no matter what. But when I say this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, I am not embellishing at all. The Chainsaw Man movie takes a really interesting arc of the manga and then transforms it into one of the most gorgeous animations I've ever seen. My jaw was dropping every other minute at how fucking amazing this movie looks. And of course the movie wouldn't be what it is without the writing of Tatsuki Fujimoto. This movie is heartbreaking in so many different ways, and I found myself tearing up at least 3 times. If every adaptation was this good, Dragon Ball Evolution would be the greatest movie ever made. 6 stars. Everyone was right. Every person ever that has ever talked about how good Oldboy is was right. Oldboy is not just a movie, but an event. And not on some blockbuster bullshit epic. No, like a once-in-a-lifetime experience like nothing we will ever see again. And not even in the way that it's the best written movie ever or the best shot movie ever. even though it is. No, it's an event because it is special, and I'm not going to spoil one damn thing about it. Watch Oldboy, plan out a time to watch Oldboy, do whatever you can to watch Oldboy, please, for your sake. 6 stars. Jung-gu is a mild-mannered police officer living in Gukseong, South Korea. Early in the morning, Jung is woken up and told to come to a crime scene near the outskirts of town. He arrives to the grotesque smell of rotting flesh as a man decaying sits idly in handcuffs. Jung walks inside and sees 2 mangled bodies surrounded by walls smeared with blood and flesh. This is not an isolated incident. Something is wrong with this town, something evil and powerful and imminent. And as Jung tries to investigate what is really happening in this small town, he comes home to find his always positive daughter Hyojin acting very strange. The Wailing is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I have never had an experience watching a movie like I did when I watched this. The Wailing is long and chaotic, and at times made me question if the story was going to go into a direction that would have been disappointing. But I promise you, if you trust that this movie will go somewhere that is worth seeing, you will not regret it. A movie with so many moving parts, so many explanations for what is really happening, constantly making you rethink who is who and what is what, that when it slows down and leaves us in between the glowing light of a news broadcast, only then do we finally understand. Hidden in plain sight was the answer. 6 stars. Okay, so that was my top 10 movies I watched in 2025. I watched a lot in 2025, and so far, 2026, I've been watching even more. If you thought my reviews were even kind of a little interesting, then maybe stick around. I'm planning on making more videos about movies in the future. I also have a letterbox where I post all of my genius movie reviews. And if you've watched anything that blew your mind in the last year, I'd love to know. I still am in desperate need to watch Sinners and like 500 million thousand classics that I keep telling everyone I'll get around to. Genuinely, thank you for watching. It means a lot to me. Making videos is really creatively fulfilling for me, and I really want to get better. Okay, bye.